So I didn't actually intend to document the cleaning process of this, but the change here is so dramatic I thought I would point it out. So I soaked this in just a tub of warm water and ordinary floor cleaner and scrubbed it a bit. Then went back and started with 409 and paper towels. And this is the area that I just wiped off. These are areas that I still have to do. And I'm just amazed at how much dirt is coming off of the surface. I didn't actually expect it to change color like that, just get a little bit cleaner. On the underside, I did start cleaning the cork a little bit, and the recommendations here are basically mild dish soap and a sponge. So don't go too aggressive, just try to get it into the texture of the cork and pull out some of the oils and grease. So I'm going to take this plate here off and make sure I can get under it and clean it up itself, and hopefully be able to have just a fantastically looking case when I get done. And I will give the base basically the same treatment. So here you can see that the oil slots are going to need a little bit more cleaning, but they should also turn out quite well. So as it is so far, I'm very pleased with what I'm ending up with, and I just can't believe the difference. Anyway, one warning, don't get too aggressive so that you don't actually take the paint off of this. And that's particularly concerning where you're dealing with lacquer and not the sort of finish that I've got. You don't want to ruin the look of the Comptometer. Just a quick little bit of evidence that this unit has been opened and worked on before. That is not me. I'm not quite sure what that's trying to say. Looks like a or 8 to 82 or 8ZB asterisk. Not quite sure, and not quite sure what it means. I don't know if it's like somebody's initials or if that's a station number or just a random scrawl or some kind of a asset ID. Who knows? But these are the kind of interesting things that you do find when you open these units. Every once in a while you find that someone's been there before and left their calling card. One more interesting point. This is the strip for the covers on the number wheels. Now it has yellowed over time, and I suppose I could replace this with a piece of 10mm Mylar, but since it's intact and it's original, I'm going to leave it. However, there is one interesting bit that you may be able to see on here if I can get the light right. Well, let's try this. So you see here, it looks like this was actually turned over at least once in the process of its lifetime, probably when one bit got dirty, and rather than clean it, they simply turned it over, and that accomplished the desired effect. But it's another little interesting bit that you find in these units. You can somehow, some ways, determine the maintenance history, at least to a degree. A bit more of a comparison of the before and after on the cover plate here. So here's the plate after I cleaned it, and here is the plate for the number wheels that has not yet been cleaned. It's a little bit hard to see, but this is more of a yellowish, dirty kind of color, you know, vaguely reminiscent of what you expect in an office from someone that's been smoking a pack a day for 50 years. And just to give a little bit more information here, so this is what the cork looks like after I cleaned it up, and it's still somewhat soft, but that's kind of to be expected from the top of the unit. The bottom, however, is a different story. So I'm getting ready to clean that, and this is what it looks like before. It's pretty much all hard. It's not irredeemable, but it's in kind of bad shape. But I mean, it's not black. It's like others. It's not falling apart. It's not cracking. It's not chipping away, well, peeling away. So I expect this to clean up well. We'll see what happens when I get done. And the bottom of the unit, you can see there's a little bit of rust on the side, but the base of the unit is nice and clean, relatively speaking. There really isn't all that much wrong with this except for loose or missing screws that you may find up here, and just a lot of dirt. So we'll see what this turns out like afterwards. And I can already tell you the metal parts are cleaning up fine. They're going to be quite bright, and I'm going to be very pleased with the way they look. And I'm not going to bother showing you those because there's just nothing interesting about doing that. So let's see how this goes, and then we'll get back to the repair and assembly. I'm now in the process of cleaning the key tops and the key stems, and I wanted to point something out while I was at it. So each of these here looks pretty much the same, mostly look all right, but as you're going through this process, each one of these should be put through what I'm going to call a straight line test. These keys should be straight in both dimensions, here and here. Now, if you look at a couple of these, you'll see this one here looks all right, but if you turn it over, you can see that it does not sit flat. That is going to have to be corrected. Same thing exists to a degree with this key here, also to the number 8 key. But 7 is a bit worse than number 8. But then there's a different problem. And if you look at number 9, you can see if I put it right up against the 8 that this key actually goes back a bit, as well as being a little bit bowed. So there are 2 dimensions in which this particular key stem is going to need to be adjusted. So I just wanted to point that out and make sure that everybody understands that when you're going through and cleaning these sorts of things, you need to make sure that you do a careful inspection of every single part while you have access to it before you reinstall it. Otherwise, when you get done, you're going to find that things don't work right and you're not going to know why. So just one little detail that it's tedious, it's time consuming, but you need to make sure that you don't overlook it because it is vital. Here's an example of how that straight line test I was talking about works. So what I'm doing here is I have just a simple piece of notepaper, and I have taped it to my kitchen counter. And what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the edge of the key with the ruled lines on the paper, because this surface, this is not going to bend much. The other bit might. So with that lined up, then using the lines on the page as a reference, you can pretty easily see if there's any deviation, because parallel lines just help you be able to figure that out. And then you can do the same thing, standing the key on end like this, and it's not going to want to stay there necessarily, but put that right on top of one of the lines and see if there's any deviation as it goes down the line on the paper. If there is anything, well, that's what you've got to fix. And that will also help you to figure out if you've bent it in the wrong place when you're trying to correct it, or if you've overdone the job and need to go back and straighten it out. Now, these don't have to be perfect. The mechanism is fairly forgiving, but you want to make sure that everything ends up roughly where it belongs within, say, a millimeter, if you can do it. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention as I was doing some of the repairs. In between doing other things, I'm also in the process of cleaning key levers and key tops. Now for me, again, the easiest way to get these things clean is to try to sand off the dirt, just because I don't think it's going to come off any other way. And it's a lot easier to do a key stem with a broken key than it is to do one that has a key still on it, because it makes it very hard to get into this area here. Now I show these things because I want to point out a couple of things. As you do the cleaning, And I'm not going to exactly tell you what I'm doing because I'm not sure it's the best way. It works for me, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. As you're working, you're going to find that there are defects in some of these keys that are going to need to be addressed. For example, this one here, if you look closely, you can see a ring around the crown of the key. That is not dirt. That is actually a crack that's going all the way around the underside of the crown. That will have to be dealt with. And on one of these, you can see here, it's a little difficult, but I think you can see it. There is a crack forming right here. Now this one presents an interesting little question. Do you try to repair it here, or do you wait for it to break off so that you can get inside and put adhesive across the entire surface? Either way, I think, is valid. Personally, and it may not crack. It may not break. It may stay good for a few years or much longer. It's hard to tell. It depends on how much you exercise it and how it's handled. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do here. There are ways of addressing this. It's going to require a different technique than this. This here, I don't believe actually poses a threat to the key top, but it does need to be repaired or filled at the very least to try to prevent it from going any further. But depending on what you do, you could actually ruin the key top. So you have to be very, very careful. And that's part of the reason why I'm not going to get into the details of what I'm doing on these, because it works for me, but I don't think it's the best path for other people to take. So as I'm sitting here going through the process of cleaning parts, I wanted to mention something that was kind of important. Two things. First, never ever put a number wheel through an ultrasonic bath. If you do, you will destroy the color. If you put it in there, only do it for about 2 minutes and keep the temperature cold. That's the real thing. Just make sure the temperature is cold. But some of these number wheels, now the paint and everything on here is pretty solid. Some of these number wheels, if you clean them with anything more than dish soap and a soft cloth, you will not have a number wheel when you get done. So please make sure that you protect those, since they are what's most important about the machine. The other thing is dealing with the dirty water. When you get done with it, don't, and this is clean because I just changed it out not too long ago, don't simply chuck it. You want to take it and you want to put it through a fine mesh. In this case, this is a ball that I have for containing parts that are too small for the mesh in the ultrasonic cleaner. You might miss a small spring, like one of these. That will keep the machine from working, just that little bit. So don't simply throw the water away and let it go down the sink without straining it, and then carefully looking at what's left before you decide that there's nothing but garbage left in the strainer. I can't tell you how important it is to make sure that you recover all the parts. You can't emphasize that strongly enough. Some of these things are very, very tiny. I mean, look at this here. That's all there is to it. Well, it's easy to lose that if you don't keep track of it. That's one of the reasons I'm working on a bright colored towel here, even though this is really not one I intended to put a whole lot of grease on, but you need to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure that everything that you took out goes back in. So just make sure that you are paying proper attention. I'm currently in the process of cleaning all the various parts and pieces here, and I thought I'd take a break from it and show you some of the differences on before and after. So you can see here, this is pretty good. There's a bit of dirt in it, but not too much. But you can still see the difference between them when you look at them side by side. So we zoom in here a little bit. And it's quite clear that this one is a lot brighter than this one over here. It's especially true of the carry wheel here. You can see how deep, dark, and disgusting some of the dirt is. And same with some of these other parts. Zoom out just a little bit. Now, one thing I want to point out is that there are certain areas, and this is a good part to show for that. You see this bit here, there is a spring attachment and a pivot. Now, the spring has disconnected from this one, but the pivot is still there. You see all that dirt that's collected around that opening? This is one of the things that you most want to watch for when you're cleaning parts. Anything where there's contact, where there's movement, that is going to be a source of friction. That's going to impact how the device functions. So those are the areas you particularly want to make sure that you clean up. You're going to find all kinds of caked on dirt and grease. I mean, look at this here. That's before, and this is after. Now, this is just subtraction carry cutoff, so it's not really going to affect anything. But consider some of the more important internal parts. And here you can see that there's another significant difference in color, even though these are heat-treated parts. So if you could get all the caked-on grease away from pivot points, then what you end up with is a machine that functions smoother and more reliably. And while you may not be able to feel it, if you take a gauge to some of the keys and various aspects of the mechanism, you will be able to see that there is a measurable difference in how a cleaned and properly lubricated part behaves as opposed to one that hasn't been touched at all. So another example here are the number wheels. You can see that there is a slight difference. It's kind of hard to hold these up next to each other. But these are pretty well okay, and that's partly because I've already gone over the one on the right before I took the machine apart. But you can see there's still a difference here on the left. And what I've been doing, I've been soaking them for at least half an hour, and then, as you can see here, there's some already in the bucket. And then I will take a brush and give them a pre-wash, a good scrub, and then take them and put them into the ultrasonic bath. Now, as I mentioned, numeral wheels and key tops, keys themselves, you don't want to put in the bath very long. And besides, these aren't going to come clean in the bath. These are the things that are most likely to have rust and so forth on the top and pitting on the metal below. So those require a different process for cleaning. And what I'm doing with those is I'm giving them a good scrub, and then I'm taking them out into the garage and doing a more detailed cleaning using a dental pick and similar sorts of things to try to get the last little bits of dirt out. And then I'm sanding the key stems themselves to knock off all the rust and to eliminate some of the pits. So I just thought you might want to see some of the parts before and after, and kind of get an idea of why it's important to do a good job in cleaning. Truth be told, you don't really have to get them spotless. I'm going for a machine that looks and functions its best. So I'm doing a particularly good job. Plus, it's also just kind of my nature to do this sort of detail work when I'm working on a machine like this. But really, if all you do is knock off the surface dirt and take care of the caked on stuff like on the pivots like I was talking about here, then you will have done a good enough job to allow the machine to function properly. But in some cases, being able to get off the dirt is important to being able to see whether or not something functions properly. And one other point, you can see here that there is a bit of rust on this part. That was not there before I started, at least not very much. And I still need to go through and clean that off, but it's kind of hard with these wires. I don't want to knock them loose and lose them. These parts will rust as they dry. It doesn't take years, it takes a couple of hours. So you want to make sure that you get all the water off them as fast as you can. Now, when it came to the larger parts, especially the chassis, I preheated my oven to 175 degrees. Don't go any hotter than that or you'll start to affect the heat treat of the metal. and I put them in there for 20 minutes, and I evaporated it very quickly. And it was important to make sure the environment was hot first. But then when I got done, I still went through and brushed all the parts to try to get the rust that formed off of it, because rust did still form. Another example of what you can expect to find while you're cleaning the key stems. This key stem has already been through a scrub and 5 minutes in the ultrasonic bath. And you can see most of it's okay, but there's still quite a bit of grime and corrosion on the top of the key stem, so I will have to address that. In addition, on some of these, I have noticed that after I clean this off, I can't get rid of that line, because that line is actually a physical offset in the metal. It's worn that much. So let me clean this one up real quick, and I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. And here we are after. Now, obviously it's not all gone because the metal is pitted and it simply won't come out. Now, I'm not trying to get this perfect, not by a long shot. What I'm interested in is trying to get the stuff that's going to be above the key plate looking its best. If I get it out of the light here a little bit, you can see with less reflection, you can see the kind of quality that's there. So there's still a decent number of scratches, and the sides are never going to be perfect, and I'm not really interested in getting them perfect. I just want to make sure that the device looks its best when I get done. So the stuff that's down here, the key stem, well, it survived the last 100 years. It will certainly survive the next 100 years. So this is all about appearance, not about function. Now what I did is I took a sanding sponge, and paper will do as well, it's just for me. So this is 600 grit. This is about 800 grit. And that's all that I really needed to do, just to get the grime and gunk off of the key that you can see on the one next to it. If I put one on the other side, you can see there is a marked difference between the two, and that's what I'm really going for, just to try to make it look good. So I'm just about ready to put the thing back together. I have a few more key stems to clean, and then I'll be done. I just wanted to take a moment to show you this because I thought it was kind of interesting. So this is a bronze brush. You can get this at any Home Depot or something like that, and you can get smaller versions at a gun cleaning supply, something of that nature. This is just used for getting off grime that won't come off with a nylon bristle, but bronze being softer than steel, it's also less likely to harm the surface. Well, I bought two of these. Here is the one that I used for my cleaning chores, and you can see that I've pretty well worn it out. Now, one interesting thing about this is if you look carefully, and if I line these things up correctly, you can see that the brush I use is a full 1/16 of an inch shorter. The bristles are still standing straight than the one behind it. So this got quite a bit of use and quite a bit of wear. So don't be surprised if it takes more effort than you might think in order to clean your machine. With that, I'm now going to begin putting the machine back together, and we'll see if everything works when I get done.